So hi everyone. Thank you for joining us here in person, and I know there are some people online as well. So that's why we have microphone and so on. So I just wanted to introduce a little bit about why we're here today. We are from Swideas, and let me go there. Yeah, I'm gonna first talk about Swideas. We are a small organization. We're here based in Malmo at Staplen. I don't know if you know it, but it's very close by. And we work mainly with projects. Most of them are co-funded by the European Union, and we have actually two units. One that we do this not-for-profit projects that we develop a lot of learning, training material, and events as well, like this one, all for free and available for everyone. And in our business unit, we implement trainings and work as consultants in different fields. So for today, we're talking about a project that is called One Block for Educational Credentials. And the project partners that we have are these, because in this kind of projects, we have a transnational partnership. So the same project that has been implemented here in Sweden has been implemented just the same in the other partner countries. So in Italy, with University of Urbino and Laimomo, in Belgium with Eurada, and in Croatia with Simora. And just to talk a little bit about the agenda, we are going to introduce first a little bit of the project and what we developed, and then we're going to introduce Oliver to you. That's going to talk more about blockchain and about Chainvine as well. So, where is it? Okay. Okay. Then, just to introduce very quickly, why did we start to do OBEC? That's the short term for our project. Well, I'm a migrant myself. I come originally from Brazil, and I have had this issue when I was coming here that I had to verify all my educational credentials from Brazil, translate them all, and then come to Sweden and try to do a master's here. And I know a lot of other people had the same stories as me. They couldn't verify what they studied before. One of the inspirations that when we were talking about Abdallah and I about this project, I was like, Abdallah, there's this guy. He's based in Lund. I don't know if you know Yum Yum, a falafel place in Lund. He is Syrian, and he was telling me that he had his own company in Syria, that he has a business degree and so on, but when he came here, he couldn't certify his credentials, and he had to open a falafel store. And then me, very like trying to be nice, like, oh, but at least like maybe you like to cook. And he's like, no, I hate cooking. And you know, he's not doing what he likes to do. He doesn't do what he wants to do, and he's not using his skills because he has a lot of skills that are just going unused because he's not able to verify them. And that's a problem personally for him, of course, but also for the economy of our host country, because we can't integrate the people who are here so much and so well. So those are basically a few facts that I wanted to give to you. So we talked about blockchain mainly because Abdallah came with the idea of blockchain as well. And we were seeing, like, how can this be used for the educational context? And we saw that MIT and the Nicosia University in Cyprus had been using blockchain to issue their certifications. And why are we talking about blockchain? Well, Oliver is going to explain more to you about it, but the main reasons why we decided to talk about it was because it is a technology that is not just used for Bitcoin, for instance, but it is trustworthy because everything that is done on the chain is accessible to everyone who is in the chain. They can be easily verified by everyone, and every change that you make becomes a new block on the chain, and it's added on like this. So based on this, we had three main goals on the project. The first one was the naming the barriers, that we did a report collecting the state of knowledge and of educational institutions as well, and other private companies in Sweden and in each of the partner countries. And then we did a trial as well for this. I don't know if some of you were in our trainings, but we had some nice training models, and we certified them all on blockchain. And then now we're working on the real-life applications, that we are developing some videos with some case studies, like people telling their experiences with the project, and guiding material as well. So here we have the goals of the project, just to, well, it's mainly related to bringing digitalization to promote inclusion and integration as well of migrants here, and to encourage the European Union to apply blockchain in the educational context as well. So we have this report, and throughout our presentation, you're going to see a lot of these QR codes. They're mainly for you to access this material. This one is available on our website as well, and you can scan it if you want to check it. And I'm going to share the presentation with you later as well. And here before, we had the link for the website of OBEC. So here you can see the number of people that we interviewed to gather this report as well, and we came up with some very nice inputs from it. We saw that a lot of migrants had the same issues that I had, for instance, that they can't recognize it. For exchange students, well, I had this problem as well. You see, I had a lot of problems for this project. That when I had an exchange year in Canada, and when I came back, I couldn't use any of my credits in Brazil, and I had to do one more year in Brazil as well, because it's not the same credit system and they can't communicate with each other. So that's one of the issues that the exchange students had. And then for individuals with non-formal and formal learning backgrounds, because most of them don't have formal certifications that can certify their skills. And for institutions, they say that they have some issues. Well, all of the institutions that we talk to, they have been using digital credentials, and they don't have any technical issues using the credential, the certifications online, but they see that both young students and old students, like older students, older generations, don't use them so much because the young students think that's not really relevant. They have the paper one, and that's just contextual, right? And the older students think that they're a little bit skeptical about the technology. And when we talked about this with private companies, they mainly mention two issues. One is with the price of the logistics of creating a blockchain structure. And the second one is a privacy issue that we believe that for educational institutions is very, very important, because if I'm going to get a certification on blockchain, all my private information is going to be there. And then who is going to certify that this is actually private and that nobody else that I don't know is going to have access to it? So these are two of the main issues that we believe could be relevant when we talk about it. And a lot of the institutions also mentioned that there is a scalability issue, because every time that you issue something on blockchain, you need to pay for it. And then how many competences do you want to certify on blockchain? How many are relevant? How many can you do because of the price? Climate change. Yes. Yes. I don't know if you saw, but maybe that's a question maybe Oliver can help us with a little bit more later. But there's a lot of people as well starting to mine blockchain from solar panels. And I guess that's also, yeah? Yes. Yes. Just moving a little bit quickly. These are a little bit of inputs about what the EU is doing for blockchain. We have collected as well, and this is all available in our report. The European scheme for investments in blockchain technologies. You can apply if you have a nice project idea, usually with the Horizon program. The blockchain service infrastructure, the EBSI, that it's an infrastructure that create European-based blockchain backbone for the public sector. Then the research and potential legal and regulatory framework for blockchain, that they want to avoid irregularities or like discrepancies between countries when they start using blockchain more often. They're trying to select standards inside Europe, and then they have the partnership, the European Blockchain Partnership, that one of their backbones is exactly the EBSI, that they're trying to create a lot of things, and the Blockchain Observatory and Forum that are for communication between stakeholders. So you see that the EU is investing in a lot of initiatives around blockchain, but it's important to just note that most of them are quite recent and new, and we haven't seen the impact of them in the long term still. So these are the models that we created on the trial phase, and we created these 13 models. Each of our partner organizations could choose which ones they wanted to implement. For instance, we implemented work in a circular economy and create a business plan and idea, for instance, and soft skills for responsible entrepreneurial mindset. And all of these who participated had the option of receiving a certification on ACTA. This is the scan for you to access the ACTA platform, and it looks like this. So as soon as you are verified, your education is verified, you would send to us, and then we verify that you took this course with us, and then all the competences that are associated to this education go to your profile showing here the competences. And that was very successful because in total we had a lot of students participating as well. And yes, we learned that it's still difficult to use ACTA because it's not a lot of people know about it, and then the companies are still not there, so for you to look for jobs over there is still hard. And a lot of people are not familiar with blockchain, so they don't understand the benefits of using it for their educational credentials. That's why we had a lot of people who didn't ask for the certification on blockchain as well. And finally, this is the guiding material that I'm going to be collecting some more inputs from you all today, reflections and things that we believe could be nice to have to say to the policymakers and to other stakeholders who are interested in blockchain, using blockchain in this way, and highlighting the opportunities, challenges, and some case studies. And this is how it looks like inside of the guiding material. I have 2 case studies that I wanted just to introduce to you, that you can see the blockchains being used in other sector. The first one is local. It's here from Sweden. It's on land registration. So Sweden is starting to use blockchain to certify the property. Yes. And the idea is to use it to be able to verify easily who owns the property and so on. And then here you can see the phases of the project. I'm not going to go a lot in details, but if you want to hear more about it, you can access our material. And finally, this one, probably you know that Estonia is the country that uses blockchain the most. They're very high tech. And yes, they are developing now this first blockchain directed educational sector. And because a lot of the platforms that use blockchain or like that allow us to create smart contracts on blockchain, they use different ones. So some maybe, I'm going to leave it to Oliver to explain a bit more about that. It's very technical. But they're creating one blockchain technology that is specifically targeted at the educational sector, and then each person could have an app, and this app is going to gather all their academic achievements there. So that's basically that. And now we're going to pass it on to Oliver. Oliver is the CEO of Chainvine, and he has a background in financial technology, and also he's now based in /UK/Sweden. I have here the page of Chainvine if you want to see a little bit more what they've been doing. And there, it's a little bit about what you're going to introduce, right, Oliver? And then I put the other code here, so you can go there later. And before I let you go. Okay. Oh, that's good. So we take here out. And I just wanted to introduce a little bit. I went to your website and I saw that the initial idea for Chainvine was actually when you were coming back from London, right? And you saw an article that was saying that there was a big scheme in the wine industry, and that you noticed that then the supply chain is actually very corrupted and very problematic, and then that it could use distributed ledger technologies to address this issue. So I think it's very inspirational because you see that Oliver personally, he was very creative and innovative to use the technology this way, and you can see how blockchain can offer solutions for very different matters. So yeah, that's...
Julia. Well, thanks, Julia. And yeah, I mean, that's fine. You can actually get a picture of me with a QR code because I want to send it to my team. Just tell them QR codes are quite important. COVID kind of taught us about all of that, didn't it? No, thanks for bringing me, Julia. And Julia contacted me, I think it's a couple of years ago now, wasn't it, about the paper, and I found it interesting. And I think one thing about technology, it's always good to share knowledge and share what you're doing. So I just give you a bit of an example. I'm flying now to London because I'm doing a big pitch in front of the Financial Times on Monday. But it's really important that actually you, the people who are sort of in the education network, get to understand what technology is, and without being what I call bamboozled by consultants who want to sell you blockchain and AI for £500 or £600 an hour, sextusen or something, you know. Interesting question. So I'm going to start. This is really going to be an open talk, so I do throw questions at me. Don't worry about interrupting, because I think that's the only way we're going to, to get value out of the time. I think you, the gentleman up there, said something about solar panels and blockchain, right? So, yeah. Yeah. So how many of you actually really know what blockchain is? Right, and give me one word that describes blockchain. One word. So. Okay, that's fine. You got one? So I'll come up with one word. It's code. It's pure code. So blockchain is a word used to describe so many different flavors of code that it's almost tiring. There's 4,400 alternative altcoins, which is something that's mainly minted on the Ethereum blockchain, which is different from the Bitcoin blockchain. But they're similar because they're both public blockchains. So when we think about blockchain, and the environment, you're thinking about Bitcoin and Ethereum. You're thinking about two, what I would call basically lines of code that are public and open to the world to download a node, and it has no control over what it does because of its by nature decentralized in that way. We at Chainvine use distributed ledger, so blockchain would come under distributed ledger. We did start with Bitcoin because that was the only blockchain that was around then, and we used a concept called colored coins, which was putting code on the actual blockchain itself and putting a bottle of wine or something there, or the identity around it. But now we use distributed ledger, and I would distinguish between blockchain and distributed ledger because for purists in cryptology and such, cryptography, sorry, you would say that an open blockchain is pure blockchain, like Bitcoin or Ethereum. But a distributed ledger is a ledger that's permissioned by all of us, and a distributed ledger is probably what will be used by the educational sector in the end. To give an example of that, Fabric is probably the most commonly open source used code in the Hyperledger project. Now Hyperledger is just a kind of, it's a bit like Red Hat was in the old days, an open source place to join, and the community gets together and works on code, because open source is best for code in my opinion, because if you open up your basic fundamentals, then people can spot the mistakes quicker and share it. This goes back to education again. So Fabric is most commonly used. Around 70% of corporates will use a permission blockchain like Fabric. Probably second is one called Corda that was initially created by our free group, which was funded by mainly the international banks of the world. So it was a distributed ledger, and Corda's second to Fabric, and they're all permission networks. So you can't join that network unless you're actually a part of that platform or society, if you like. So we use Fabric and Corda at Chainvine because I work helping supply data from the producer of a vineyard to the government itself. So compliance and regulatory data, and I'll explain a bit about Chainvine. But is that kind of clear on blockchain, just so you get the distinguish between the... Okay.
I just like to make sure difference, mining and Bitcoin is like a lot of energy.
Yeah.
Blockchain, the ones that people like,
you won't use mining.
No, use
no. No, but you're right. I mean, that's the nature of it. And then Ethereum is moving from proof of work to proof of stake, and that completely changes the whole philosophy around open. I like Bitcoin. I sold too much, and I actually bought a round of beer in London in 2016 with Bitcoin. It was a really good round, but I do regret that. Even today, I mean, I always saw it as a commodity. It became a commodity for me in 2017. It no longer became a way of actually paying for something. It became what they say, hodl. So, and that's the values created through that mining.
And these distributed ledgers, like what's the difference from just having a database? Or it's a good
question. It's a good question, yeah.
But it's not using proof of work or proof of stake.
No, but it's using the fundamental concept of everyone displaying what they're doing and being transparent in displaying when they're changing data. So I'll give you a good example. Why does government and private sector want to use distributed ledger? Now, as Julia kindly said, I was flying actually. I used to live in Göteborg, so jag bor i Sverige nästan 24 år, so I can speak a little svensk. So just thought I'd add that. I was flying, and I read this story about an Indonesian chap, and it was really interesting because I grew up in Indonesia, and his name was Rudy Canarovan, and he had just been arrested in America for perhaps the biggest wine fraud in the planet, the history of the world. They say he made around about $50 million, maybe even $100 million from selling fake fine wine for over 10 years. when the judge sentenced him in America, they said, you know, you're a really nice guy, but you're going to have to be jail because it's so big, the fraud that you did. But Rudy was really good at artwork, so he was very good at creating labels, and he had a good palate. So you know the rule about wine, anything over 30 pounds or euros or whatever, and it's just bragging. It's not really going to taste much different. And I collect it, so I know. But what I found fascinating was our trust in a paper-based system. So we go like on certificates now, but Julia, and we believe things more strongly when they're handed to us on a piece of paper. It's absolutely bizarre for me. And through my work with SMEs and going digital, and what Chainvine began as sort of a white label platform, creating blockchain solutions for many different industries, including education and different sectors. But now we've gone firmly into the wine and spirit sector because I believe that's got a big enough problem itself. I was shocked that there was no communication, right? Do you know how Rudy got caught? So a gentleman named Charles Ponsett turned up at an auction in New York, and they were selling bottles of 67 and 70-something Ponsett wine. Charles stood up and said, basically, it's absolutely impossible for you to be selling that wine. And they said, who are you? And he said, my name's Charles Ponsett. I didn't start making wine until 1980. Stop the auction. And to give you an example of the price of some of this, there was a wine bottle sold, it's not in national news, but for around about 30,000 euros a couple of weeks ago at an auction house. The gentleman who bought it said, you know, I'm not sure now. Can you please do the due diligence again and check? They went back through all the paperwork, and they found one flaw, and then they found out that it was fake. But all of the paperwork would have suggested to you that it was real. But what I was saying, and what I say to the industry, is if we begin to share data in a kind of democratic way, it doesn't have to be totally transparent, but it has to be traceable. And that's the key, traceability, not transparency, to be honest with you. Most corporates don't like transparency, not even the ones who make T-shirts and claim that they want to do it for the good of the world. Not going to mention any names. But, yeah. So, no, not mentioning names. But they don't like transparency in many ways, but they do like traceability, and that's why I like distributed ledger. So I founded Chainvine basically on the concept of how can we make the wine world better and make sure that people who invest in alternative assets or commodities are actually getting what they've asked for. And it all comes down to digital certification. In my opinion, it's quick, it's fast, and also it's not a silver bullet. But I'll get to that point now. So 2 years into starting Chainvine, the OECD asked me to come on board as a rural expert in innovation. I'm not an expert, they're allowed to call me, I'm not allowed to call myself one, and I wouldn't. But it was interesting because we were trying to help SMEs all over the world go digital, and the OECD were like, we've got to explain what AI and blockchain is. And I said, no, you don't, because of their farmers, and they don't have time to understand AI blockchain. They barely got time to subscribe to Netflix, and I said, that's where you need to be. What's the features and benefits of subscribing to Netflix? Well, you know, you can cancel it after a month. It's great. So I explained to them what we were doing was creating a Netflix of grapes, the ability to upload data and share it in a very convenient and easy manner. And so we created our first product, which was a minimal viable product I called it Intelligent Wine. And it used a QR code and some IoT devices and blockchain. And I traveled from London to Amsterdam to Money 2020, told the bankers it was Intelligent Wine. I said, really? We're going to get something from that? I said, it won't help you guys, don't worry. Went up to Hamburg, then actually here to Copenhagen, did a talk. Then I took the bottle to Sweden Food Tech. And I put the bottle on the table, and I said, this bottle is going to tell you its history and its journey. And it's through digital certification. So each capital that I went into, I scanned the bottle, and the bottle began to upload information to the blockchain. So we had a validation and transaction of where the bottle was, who it was with, how much it was worth. And I was actually using hardware IoT devices as well, so I knew the humidity, temperature of everything around the wine. But more importantly, actually, every time I scanned the wine or the QR code, I knew the geolocation because of I was using my phone. And my phone had inbuilt geolocation, so basically we were plotting the history. So there was a digital certificate for the whole wine's journey, and that's why we call it Intelligent Wine, because it's actually building intelligence. And you're using distributed ledger to validate that intelligence and say that it's not been changed, that it's been shared with the right person or persons. Around about a year later, does anybody know what HMRC stands for in the UK? Scatterverket. The tax man asked me to come in nicely, and they said, could you please explain blockchain? And they all said IBM there. And IBM said blockchain will solve pretty much everything, and I disagreed with IBM because I thought, you're not really telling the government what they need to hear. So I told them the story of intelligent wine. Now immediately the tax man said, well, why can't we see the data that you're carrying? Because actually if you show us that data, maybe there's no need to have compliance documents on imports and exports into the United Kingdom anymore. Maybe it can all be pure data driven. But how do you share that data? And how does the government know that the data is not being changed? So you begin to open up a permission network. You begin to onboard people onto a shared platform, is what Chainvine is, essentially. A shared platform that has access to the data and ability to change data, but everyone is aware of when the data is changing. To give you an example of a real-life use case, we had an export of about 30,000 bottles of Spanish wine coming into London just after Brexit, and COVID had sort of come in as well. And the border force got a hold of the paperwork, and they said, actually, you've put the wrong warehouse for this good on the certificate. And because of wine is a controlled substance, it has food security, and it also has a huge tax around it. They said, we're not going to let the wine out of the port. So it took 3 days for the importer to get a hold of HMRC, because I don't know if you guys ever tried calling Scatterverket sometimes. Yeah, it's pretty, and the queues are big. But there's no queue at the port to go to. So it took 3 days. He got through, spoke to the border force, and he said, what do I do to change this? He said, well, you need to speak to the consignor, the producer. Okay, what does he need to do? Okay, he needs to sign a new document and actually write the correct bonded warehouse on that. Great, can I UPS this over to you tomorrow then and get my wine? And they said no, because actually it's going to go to the bottom of a really big stack of paper. And it's probably going to take me 2 weeks to get to yours, because actually you're not the only one who's got a problem. And if you can imagine, this is a fresh good, really. I mean, if you keep it on a dock or a port too long, it can go off and it can expire. Using a shared platform or permission network, it would have been very easy for the consumer to raise their hand immediately in almost real time and say, I'm changing the name of the bonded warehouse, I'm responsible for that data. So HMRC or the government now would accept that, because they'd say, we can sue someone. So you say about blockchain adoption. Do you know what the biggest problem for adoption was with digital and blockchain? And the government told me this. They said, but we need paperwork to sue people. We need paperwork to make people responsible. And I said, well, how do you sue Mark Zuckerberg? And they went, oh, data. And I went, oh, didn't think about that. And then I said, well, there you go. Every time you think you need something to sue someone with, just look at Mark at Facebook, and then it becomes very easy how to sue him. And so it's a misconception around technology, in my opinion. And what I want to do is try and break down those walls for you today. So just jump in if you have questions. We've been working with UK government now for 3 years on these import-export documents between Australia and the UK. Now the USA has joined in. I'd love for Sweden to join in. I spoke to Systemet 4 years ago. They said we have to do something soon. Still waiting. And you think about Systemet, right? You go to Systemet and you look at a bottle or a box of wine and it has a certificate on it, right? On the box saying, I'm organic. But how do you know it's organic? Is there any way you can find out? And the vineyards would love to share that information with you as consumers. And it's their IP. So now in a roundabout way, I'm going to come back to education and the way we share education. So we've been working with wine a long time. I'm in quite a few international bodies in wine. And if anyone has heard of the OIV, Organization of Wine and Vine, so anything made from vines or wine they do all the technical details. Somebody said, what you're doing is really interesting, because you're sharing all of this data between the producer, the vineyard, the importer, the exporter, the logistics people, and the government of the UK, and they can all get on this platform and see the raw data. There's no duplication of paperwork, no duplication of data. It's almost like a wormhole going right to that pure data that you want. And one of the chairman of this committee, and it's 48 different countries in it, said, but this is brilliant, because I come from a soil background. I work with dirt. But he says, how do we help farmers begin to share information between one another? Because if vineyards are very small, I mean, they're all SMEs, and they're not hugely technical, because obviously they're out making wine. But they all have valuable data. And this could be anything from soil or weather temperature. You know, how was it that week when you began the crops? What was the weather like? And all of this data could be extremely valuable if it's in a shared platform or shared between the farmers in an educational way. But why would you use distributed ledger there? Probably to give credit due where credit is due. And that's kind of important for the educational sector, and why I sort of was helping Julia with what are the features and benefits for the educational sector of using blockchain or distributed ledger. And it's really IP. Maybe in the future, I was doing a talk at Sweden Food Tech last week. Maybe in the future we will 3D print all of our food and wine. But who owns the IP? You know, is it that family in Italy that's been making wine for 150 years? Sure it is, because it's their recipe. But has the logistics in 30 years, 40 years become a thing of the past, and we actually print our own wine and food at home, like we microwave things today? Maybe a bit out there, but it goes back to the fundamental thing: whose knowledge is this? Whose IP is it? And that's where I see distributed ledger being very powerful and economic, right? Because if you think about dispute resolution, maybe there's 10 of you in a room who are working on one paper together. How do you really keep the history of who did that? Who keeps all the paperwork? Whose database should be on yours or yours? You know, is that fair? That one of you says, "I've got all of the data, I'll take responsibility for it"? Because if people fall out, I know, I had a startup. How many I found are left? It's quite important. When we first started Chainvine, we did a music accelerator. Accelerators for startups to go into one sector or industry. And a lot of musicians actually work together in a creative way, but a lot of it is documented. So if any of you have heard the term one sheet. So one sheet is where the song is written or the music is shared. And you might have like a guitar player in LA, a drummer in London, and a singer in Sweden. And they're all collaborating on this project, which is essentially IP. And they need some kind of way to manage that for the future, and who gets the royalties. So the royalties from something. And I think this is really where the DLT can actually manage that in a better way than having individual databases that are sharing between themselves. Because generally, it's always about humans, and they break down in the end. But if you have a digital discipline where it's shared, and that's what distributed ledger allows us, then it gets rid of a lot of these problems. I'm not saying they won't happen, because they will. It's not a silver bullet, but it's a far better way to do things. And to really sum that up, I don't know how much time have I got, Julia? Okay. To sum that up, I mean, the government, it's funny because we've been working for years and now they're doing something new. They're calling it the ecosystem of trust. It's quite a good word, because basically what you're creating in your shared platforms is an ecosystem of trust. And people will be found out quicker and faster if they're going to maybe plagiarize your document. Maybe you spent 4 years studying something and you did a really good paper, and then somebody pops up in London or Berlin and says, I actually had this idea and I wrote it. And I don't know, plagiarism, is it a big thing in education? Yeah. So you can begin to see there. And does anyone have any questions really around that? I mean, sharing of data.
Of expired goods. One of the shops I've been on was mayonnaise, ketchup, so basically what turns out that these shops, they just like change the expiration date or just like something on it. Came to my mind. So maybe with this solution, and actually as a consumer I can put my mobile phone and check it and see if this product actually checked or still eatable.
Yeah, you can. I mean, I can show you a bit of the app if you want to. Do you want to see a bit of the app, how it breaks down walls between different public and private sector? You're right, though, because when I did a talk, I've been at Sweden Food Tech 4 years, which is great fun. Always find a good restaurant when you go to a food tech event, because they're always experimenting on you, and the food can be a bit funny. It was good last time. We had some good vegan stuff, which was interesting. But yeah, horse meat scandal in the UK. It cost companies, actually, some of the companies went down. But Tesco, you know, like the equivalent of e-krona and Hem Shop, was selling horse meat and calling it beef because they didn't know. And that's insane, because you know, as a consumer, you're eating this stuff and digesting it. And you're right. I mean, we work, basically you scan the QR code on a bottle. How do I click through? Is it on here? I don't know if I can show the app. I was just going to show... Oh, the link's there. So I've shared a link for the flat demo, and that's... We can do that, because it might just give people an idea, but we actually put the QR code on the bottle, and if you scan it as a consumer, you'll get consumer data. If you register and scan it as a tax inspector, you'll get the tax information. So this bottle has gone through customs on this date, and it has all of its bills of lading. We call it CDS documents in the UK, so it's slightly different in Sweden. And if you're a food security inspector, you'll go to the information you want, because you don't care about the price or anything like that. You just want the ingredients. You want to know the dates that it's still good to eat or drink. And then if you're a vineyard, then you go to all of the logistics data, so you know if somebody's parallel shipped your goods. Say it's meant for one market and somebody's bought it and taken it to another market. So it's all of this goodies kind of data. And this is actually what I'm showing on Monday at the Financial Times. So Fetzer Vineyards is part of Concho Torre. It's the largest vineyard in the world. They make around about 39 million cases times by 12. Make a lot of wine. Yeah, there's some going to the UK, but Fetzer is their American vineyard, and actually it's really good red wine. They make it in old bourbon barrels. So if you want a red wine with a little bit difference, recommend it. It's very good with a steak, gotta say. And K&L Gates is a law company we work with. I'm always happy that they work with us, because that's Bill Gates' dad's company. So Microsoft get really annoyed with me when I'm in the room, because I always ask them to put their hand up and say, you should be working with them, but we are. They like our blockchain technology better, and obviously we're Chainvine. Can I click through? If you go to Let's Get Started. Okay, it's gone blank. It was there just now, wasn't it? Okay, well, it should show the fields. I don't know. Can you go back one, Julia? Yeah, it's not showing, is it? Oh, there we go. So you see here, what we're doing is we're saying if you're registered here and you really want to find out information on a good, you can log in as a consumer, employee, and it wouldn't be like this in real life, because basically we want the consumer actually to see these three parts. That's mainly so for these two, the taxman and the food security people, to know that actually this data is being shared with consumer and employee. And the FSA actually like that. The FSA is I don't know what the equivalent is in Sweden of Food Security Agency. And yeah, I'm not sure. But it's like the Skatteverket of food. If we go, can you click on HMRC? And yeah, so we might need to go back one. But I think if you want to do like, I can send the app presentation, but if we can go to HMRC, that's brilliant. And just keep clicking through until we get to the QR code. Okay, I think it might be just, yeah, it's not really, it's crashing. So we use two-factor authentication there, so that's just some banking technology. It's just about identity, really. This is your identity, really, your phone. Most of the data you have on this, pretty much, it's probably got more data on your phone than anything else you carry today. Yeah, if you do that. Brilliant. Yeah, so simple thing, scan wine. If we scan the wine there, click through, and just, if we stop there, should go to the next screen. No, it's not being nice today, is it? Okay, cool. So we leave it here, because you can see the product information here. You have the history. And actually, what we will do is just click on this HMRC button, because now we'll begin to see about document sharing. It's probably going to do that again, isn't it? Yep. So you see here, this CDS is a new system by the UK government. It's about all electronic imports and data coming in. And you have several different notifications, different compliance documents. And what we're saying here is basically in the future, HMRC could actually log in to the company's database in the cloud and begin to get direct access to their data. And what it does is say, actually, you don't need to duplicate data anymore. You don't need any paperwork because we absolutely trust you and we know you're totally responsible for the data. And that's done by giving each of the people in the shared platform a distributed ledger identity. So there's a hash with an identity. We do that because it's extremely hard to hack that. Even on a permission network, you still need to attack the whole permission network. So you know about, and it's not impossible to do, but it puts the scales of economics up for anyone who wants to hack a system. It's like a spread out army, if you like. It's very hard to attack it all at once. So that's why we do that. And the features and benefits are obviously quite clear to anyone. Basically, a world without paper duplication and data duplication, which is just a bigger problem for the environment as paper. You know, the actual use of what we're doing, and we're so wasteful with it. You know, we just like emails, we just fire them off. You know, I hate them. I've got about 10,000 unanswered emails on my work one. It's terrible because I just get I get spammed a lot, and that's just the nature of running a company. But somewhere, someone's paying for all of that energy, and somebody's, you know, it does have a cost. Sure.
So, who is allowed to add this data? Is it the producer?
Ideally, the producer is. Everything starts at the farm.
Yeah.
So HMRC put it in a really good way. So one of the tax people actually said to the producer, because it's great to get them all in a room, and they said, you know what, 90% of all the information I want, you've got. So can I access it? And they're like, yeah, you can, but we want to use Oliver's platform because then we know we can trust that you're actually who you say you are in London, and you're a tax inspector because we have your office address, office telephone number that's factored into the registration with 2-factor, 3-factor authentication. I would actually like that to be a QR code like we have, you know, for like banking in Sweden. So when when you just scan in your bank account, because I think actually that's better. And I was saying to Julia earlier on when we met that, you know, the passwords and such will be a thing in the past, and it will go down to biometrics in the future. So the producer would permission everyone on that chain. They would say, we're going to open up our data. And what does HMRC do for the producer? The producer's like, well, you know, just going to pay the same amount of tax, aren't I? What's in it for me? Why should I share my data with HMRC? Because generally you don't really want to share anything with the taxman, not if you can help it. I suppose the idea is, if you look at the gentleman with the Spanish wine, it is to get in a green channel and be trusted. So in fact, all of this data is shared anyway. What we're just saying is we're making it easier and we're making it more identifiable. To give you another example of that, we did a technology for good project with a small African country called Seychelles. It was terrible. I had to fly there for 7 days. Absolutely horrible, in the middle of the Indian Ocean, giant turtles and really nice water. But it was brilliant because if we worked out that for one export document, it took about 7 government myndighetens to agree for a fish export on a piece of paper. So I had one minister, I think it was for fisheries, and he said, I said, look, we're going to use the new system, distributed ledger, and we're going to share data in a better way. And then he says, I don't want to share data with that ministry, I don't like them. And I said, well, but you do. He goes, yeah, but I know exactly what we're sharing. And I said, well, how many bits of paper have you shared with that ministry this year? So the minister immediately turns around to his aide and goes, how many bits of paper we shared with them? And then you see the aide just go, oh, right, boss. I'm just going to call the guys and girls at the office. They come back and go, we don't know, but maybe in 10 days we can go and do an audit and find out how many bits of paper we shared with the ministry of the other ministry. And I said, well, actually, you could just do a real-time audit now, know who, when, and why they accessed your data, and if they made any changes to your data. Then the minister was totally on board. He was like, really? So he's like, I kept total power of who I share my information with, and I know exactly who I'm sharing my information with, and I permissioned them to do it. It makes total sense when you put it that way, and this is what a lot of people don't understand about paperwork. It just gets lost. It's rubbish. It's, you know, I just, you know, live in Sweden. I haven't touched a krona note in maybe 3 or 4 years. You know, but you won't. What I say to governments, and I say you won't digitize the things I don't like documents. And if you think about traveling during COVID, and I'll wrap up the speech there on that, and then we can, if there's any Q&A on it. What COVID has taught us is that for a QR code, we were booking private data to travel. So I was traveling between Stockholm and London still. But essentially what I was doing was pre-booking myself on a government system saying, I'm going to be here, I've come from here, I have taken a test, I'm fit and healthy, I don't have COVID. And they give me a QR code to show border and then scan me and go through. And that's really, it's as simple as that. I think the purpose of technology is not technology, it's a means to an end. And that's the thing with blockchain and AI, these are means to an end. And at the end of it all, if we found out from our project that the costs that we were saving for importers and exporters came to around about 60 to 50% on all compliance of moving a good internally and externally. So if you could put 50 or 60% back of the cost, and it's 15 billion in the EU and UK a year that we spend on compliance documents for moving goods. If you can put, I don't know, 20% of that back in the real economy, you're actually showing the benefit of technology. So was I good? Did I explain it okay?
One question
Yeah.
regarding the privacy that we
Yeah.
were talking about. How could we go around that if we have certification?
So the problem with a public open blockchain is if you, there was a funny story, I don't know if you guys read it, about Google. There was a guy suing Google in Holland because they wouldn't delete some of the information on him on the net quick enough. But then Google found out that he'd put some private information of his own on the Bitcoin blockchain. And they were like, you know, I'm sorry, but he's deliberately put this information on something that is immutable and can't be reversed because there's no one to call it Bitcoin, right? You can't call up somebody at Bitcoin and go, hey, you know what? I made a really stupid mistake. Can you take that data off the chain? It's not going to happen. But, you know, Google has to take it off. So with permissioned chains, privacy is inbuilt. I don't know if anyone's heard of zero knowledge proof. So zero knowledge proof is a protocol within a blockchain. And a guy explained it to me, a really clever chap who developed the multi-chain, Gideon Greenspan, years ago. He said this is equivalent of two blind children in a room swapping crowns, of color crowns, and being able to, with 99.9% accuracy, tell if it's a red or yellow crown for drawing. So you don't even need to actually declare who you are. Everything around the good will say that this is a legitimate transaction. So that you can take it to the extreme. The banks are already using zero knowledge. They've done it for different trades because they like to be anonymous. It's a funny thing, really, bankers. They always, you know, they like to be anonymous in their dealings. I wonder why. But I think generally the majority of people, we share enough data and we're online and we know that. It's a give and take situation. GDPR, we're GDPR compliant on what we do. So it was funny when the Seychelles were negotiating with the European Union for fishing rights. EU got really upset because they were like, oh, is that an English guy? Because they were all over negotiating while I was there. Just is that the English sort of giving you guys advice? And I said, no, I'm Swedish today, don't worry. I am Swedish as well. So, and they were running out of the negotiating room. And they said, what do we do? And I just said, because if they have paper certification still for fishing. And to put that into context, if tuna is like their biggest fish export, you can imagine how big that was in COVID because of 70% of their income came from tourism, which went totally reliant on fish. But some of the Europeans weren't actually allowing the paper documents to get back to the Seychelles, which meant their fish was left on the docks for maybe 2 or 3 months. To put that in perspective, that could shut down the biggest employer of people in the Seychelles, the giant fish factory they have there. So Seychelles asked to go digital. They said, can't we just do this digitally? It'd be much easier. And the only thing I said to them was, make sure you tell the EU you're GDPR compliant. So as soon as they actually jumped in the room and said, we're GDPR compliant. And in that case, then the head negotiator said, well, in that case, then we could probably share data with you in that sense. But privacy is key. That's why you have authentication in the form of a phone or an email. These things can be removed after time in a permission network. And also it's how you engage with a permission network. So we wouldn't want too much private data of an individual. But I mean, you can compare that to the Danish identity, you know, the NEM identity, which goes from the individual to the government to the employer they work with, like a triangle of data. So, yeah, there's always going to be give and take on anything with data. That's why I would never do anything criminal with Bitcoin or Ethereum. I'd rather have cash because that's easier to get away with than using cryptocurrencies, in my opinion.
Good question. I don't know if I understand right, but you say that there are not redundancy with the system, like there are not a backup system, another system. What happens when this system fails or is compromised? The second one is like, can I delete information if I want, or I need like completely remove information?
On our system, you can, but we're going to know you've done it, and you're going to have to explain why you're doing it. Because if it's shared data, and the taxman has their data as a producer, so you won't be able to delete the HMRC data, right? Because that's up to HMRC if they want to delete their own data. They'll create data from your data. They have no right to actually access your data or change it. Only the producer can do that. And if the producer actually puts too much data there and says, actually, I've made a mistake, we keep that data, or we keep the transaction on the distributed ledger, but they can change it, but we'll know that it was changed, and there have to be reasons for it. So
yeah, but if for some reason I need to remove all the info, like for example, for privacy or something, I don't want, not just in this system for the wine, but I need to remove information, like removing this in the mean that remove, like no more existence.
I mean, if you delete the data, you can delete the data. I mean, most of this data won't be on the blockchain. It will be stored on the cloud. But we will know if you have tampered with the data or want to change it, and that's the whole idea of having a shared platform. We manage really the picks and shovels. We're picks and shovels. We manage the transactions and validations. So for me, a transaction is a change of data. So it's like I apply banking technology to it. Every transaction must be monitored. It's got to be auditable. So if you go back, and you're probably right to everyone, say, look, we're doing a clean of our database. We're getting rid of this data. And if you're in a shared permission platform and network, it'll go down to process. So it's all about process in the end, really. As I said, on the public blockchains, Ethereum or Bitcoin, you would find, I don't know if it's totally impossible to get rid of the data, but I would say it's pretty impossible. If you would need, 50% or more to begin to change the direction of a blockchain or that, but you wouldn't put private data on a public blockchain. It's just absolutely, well, yeah, you heard about the guy in Holland, right? In Google. I mean, it's just.
And the third question, like, what happens when the system is compromised or not, or down? What is the backup of the redundancy system?
So the data is stored independently. I mean, we're mainly working on the security of access to the data. So nobody should be able to get through to that. I can't say it won't happen. It could happen. As I said, though, it's going to be really difficult. We get like sometimes attacks on the database or to try and get information, but it's really hard to break our system, because you need to, first of all, you need a good reason to it, and we're not storing anyone's cash, so we're not actually doing the payments or a banking facility. So the only people who really want to hack our system would be somebody that maybe has got a huge fraudulent consignment, or say we're working with a high-end wine, like, for example, like Petrus or something, and it's €20,000 bottle. They might try and hack our system to try and get a digital watermark from us, but they're not, we're going to see. It's going to be really hard to do. I'm not saying it's impossible, because somebody will go out and do it tomorrow if I say that. Interesting story about that, right? Do you remember the Sony hack and the privacy about the emails? They were writing about their actors, and they weren't saying very nice things about some of them. Probably deserved it. But they went to use fax machines. So I was doing a talk like this, and somebody said, Oliver, why are they using fax machines? Do you think it's because they're harder to hack? And I said, no, it's because if we stopped using faxes about 20 years ago, and so did the criminals, but if we start all using faxes again, criminals will find out a way to hack that. So it's about staying ahead of them in many ways. I think the economies of scale really come in here. So is it worth hacking it? Is it worth trying to distort private information? But then again, distributed ledger is not perfect for everything in that sense. And I would say, like, just be careful with your private data. I mean, everyone is really not careful with it. LinkedIn is probably the most hacked platform out there, and people like to try to share information on LinkedIn. Like, don't, please send it to an email or something. Don't send it there. Facebook.
The case, for example, for this company, the system is not available. How can they work?
So if our platform becomes redundant, they're going to have to go back to the fax machine, or something like that, or they're going to have to wait for us to fix it. If you look at the crash in Bitcoin this week, even the exchanges like Binance said, "Oops, we've got a blocked transaction." I don't think it was a blocked transaction. I don't know if they had the money for a run on every bit of Bitcoin they had. But systems go down. I mean, what if the internet goes down? What if, there's a lot of what ifs. All we can say is that our system is better than the current paper and data system that's there. It's not perfect. Never will be.
I know, but it's because I try, my mindset always is in the back part. Like, if the system is down right now, how this company or other company can operate.
No, you're right. I mean, it's like you go to an airline, right? I shouldn't say this, I'm flying later. And the check-in systems go down. Are they going to let me on the plane? Probably not. Be really annoying if they don't, because I'm meant to be somewhere tonight. But yeah, it's part of life. Things go down sometimes. We do our best to make sure they don't. So if you look at our backup infrastructure, we're using like Google or Amazon, web services. So they're pretty solid. And you can only do your best to create like the best possible platform or system to keep it going. But things do go down. But these days, usually they're back up and running, in minutes. I mean, that's the great thing about what we do as well. There's other possibilities to move stuff.
What other types of markets do you see next to or in the future of?
So I mean, there's music. I mean, music industry is finding good use for this now. I know, I think that's a brilliant idea for royalties and artists. Because like Spotify can actually do better and pay artists better. They know they can. Spotify bought a blockchain company about 3 years ago, and they really haven't changed really on the royalties. So I see that. I see better collaboration with distributed ledger even in the education system. If you're creating a course or a lecture, maybe you're going to create a course on distributed ledger in education, but there's 5 of you contributing. How do you get the royalties after 4 years, 5 years? If people are still using their education, distributed ledger is a good way to manage that. So I think that's a good one. Obviously wine, I love wine, probably too much. And anything in food safety, food security, farming. It's really like the internet in the sense that I think you're going to access blockchain platforms and apps in 5 years, and you're not even going to think about it. You're just going to be like, I trust that one because it's pretty good. And it's like, does anyone really go on the internet? You just access an app. Or you say, I'm going to Google something. Google's got that now, because maybe there'd be something else in the future that you do. Governments are obviously looking at it for land registry in the UK as well. I know ChromaWay did the land registry here with Telia. Trying to think. I mean, I've seen so many applications of it.
Maybe something environmental or sustainability-wise?
Yeah, so if you look at what we're doing, all of this data we're capturing on the journey, the product, and the history fits right in with SDGs.
True.
And ESGs. So if you want to be transparent and traceable in the transport of your goods as well. Funny enough, one of our first projects was with Lund University, and we did fair trade coffee and the way it's transported in Sweden. I think it was with Hemshop. I think it was Hemshop. No, the green one. Coop. Yeah, that's it. Or as we say in the UK, Co-op. And that's the. I think any sort of system where you want to share data and you want to be secure in it, this will be the future of doing it.
Yeah, you said that you don't store most of the data on the blockchain, but
No.
what do you store? Is it like URL or?
No, maybe like 14 fields. So name of a wine, year the wine was minted or produced. I like minted for the Bitcoin. Sorry. And actually, my colleagues are on a call now speaking to one of the largest wineries in the world, deciding what fields they want on-chain and off-chain. So can be 1, can be 2, can be 15. The less is better, in my opinion, because you just want those 5 fundamental fields, maybe to define the wine or what you're saying. I mean, perhaps if it was an educational program or certificate, you might have the identity of not the names, but the identifiable tags of the contributors on chain, so no one can remove the contributor to the project. And that's just a process. So I always say to people, like, really think about the process before you use technology, AI or blockchain. Get the process right, because if you don't, it's just going to be weird and not make sense. And we've made mistakes as a startup, for a few years, but you learn with the industry. So. That was good. I did my first talk 5 years ago in Iceland, and somebody said there were 300 people, and they said, if this was UK, you would have had 30,000 people because of the demographics of Iceland. And no one in Iceland really talks to anyone that they don't know. And so I think somebody blinked, and I said, right, yeah, good, you got a question. So that was the only question I got, because national TV was there. It was quite intimidating with all of these 300 Icelanders not saying a word and just staring at me. And then that was 5 years ago, so you can imagine people in blockchain then, they were like, what? I think when I started the company, I literally quit my day job in London and told my family I'd be home late, and they said, how late? And I said, like 7 days, and I quit my job. And yeah, but we were funded in 2018 by private equity, and it's amazing how the concept of blockchain has changed for people and the idea around it. And I hope I've just shed some light on the benefits and practicality of it. Really, really pleasure to meet you all and share that with you. Thanks. I'm just hoping the airline system's not down.